I'm Andrea Nesselcheny here this afternoon with your B-Period News. As we take a look back at the World Wars and the Cold War, we will compare and contrast their effects on Europe, Africa, Asia, and the United States. On November 11, 1918, World War I, one of the world's most gruesome wars, came to an end. The United States helped the French and British win. As a result, 10 million soldiers were dead, including 2 million Russians, 2 million Germans, 1.5 million French, and 75,000 Americans. Included with these numbers are 10 million civilians, bringing the total death rate to more than 20 million. As a result of World War I, Germany's power was weakened and shifted to Britain, France, and the United States. The Paris Peace Conference of 1919 reshaped Europe and resulted in the Treaty of Versailles. This treaty required Germany to partly dismantle its military, abandon its African, Asian, and Pacific colonies, and shift land to its European neighbors. It also forced Germany to pay annual payments, known as reparations, to the Allies for the cost of the war. Germany became bankrupt as a result of this. Moreover, the brutality radicalized many workers and peasants, mostly in Eastern Europe. Socialists and communists gained strength, launching a new political and economic system as a result of the Russian Revolution, following the fall of 4 large empires: the Russian, the Ottoman, the Austro-Hungarian, and the German Empire. Britain and France soon gained control of the Middle Eastern societies formerly ruled by Ottoman Turkey. The death of many Asian and African colonial subjects recruited to fight for Britain, Germany, or France sparked trouble, making World War I a key factor in the rise of nationalism. Then came the 14 Points. The 14 Points was President Wilson's blueprint for the world after World War I. He presented his plan to the U.S. Congress in January of 1918. He insisted that a peace plan which would succeed after the war would have to contain the principles of his 14 Points. Most of the points dealt with specific European problems that would have to be addressed after the war. The most important of the points, according to Wilson, was the 14th point. This created a League of Nations, which Wilson hoped would become an international organization to solve issues between nations and prevent future wars. The war also weakened European economies, allowing the United States to take lead of Europe. European nations owed the United States several $billion, making the United States a creditor nation. Finally, since Germany was weakened, Adolf Hitler was soon elected, having intentions to rebuild his military forces, and began annexing neighboring countries. This led to the start of World War II. Unlike World War I, World War II had large-scale consequences. Approximately 15 million military and 35 million civilian deaths were recorded. Poland and Yugoslavia both lost over 10% of their people. Britain lost 375,000 people, and France was 600,000. In Asia, over 2 million Japanese military personnel and 1 million civilians died, along with 7 million Chinese. 300,000 American military personnel died as well. The war cleared the way for a new global economic arrangement. President Roosevelt brought representatives for 44 countries to a conference to establish the post-war world economic order. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank were set up at the Bretton Woods Conference to provide credit to states requiring financial aid for major economic projects. The world politics were also transformed. World War II removed the two main threats, German Nazism and Japanese militaries. Germany, Italy, and Japan lost their colonies and were required to adapt democratic forms of government. Germany also divided into sectors controlled by Russia, Britain, France, and the United States. The Japanese, having displaced the West in power, weakened the Western colonial rule throughout Southeast Asia. Meanwhile, Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese communists took advantage of Japanese to gain support for their movements. New institutions were developed, such as the Yalta Conference, brought together by Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin. They called the conference to determine the post-war political order. Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill agreed to set up a world organization, the United Nations, and proposed goals and a voting system for the new organization. The Yalta Conference also divided Europe into anti-communist and communist spheres. The aftermath of the war also brought about a new rivalry between the United States and the USSR. The United States, being politically and economically stronger, became the dominant power, taking the lead in protecting a global system. On the other hand, in Eastern Europe, the USSR replaced Germany as the dominant power and increased the appeal of communism. The communist nations led by the Soviet Union and democratic nations led by the United States were the cause of the Cold War. The U.S. and the Soviet Union divided Korea in half, with the U.S. taking the South and the Soviet taking the North. The U.S. budget for national security increased dramatically. The North Atlantic Trade Organization, which was established in Western Europe, grew in power as well. Germany and Japan, who had been defeated in World War II, began preparations for another war. In the end, communism collapsed. The Soviet Union continued its aid to Eastern Europe countries and strengthened the national military force. That concludes our B period news. Now you know everything that you didn't know, that you needed to know, that you wanted to know.